was trying to figure out for myself, why do I want to do, why don't I just want to go work in education? I love education. Why can't I do something that works with the ELAPC? Because I want to stay on the ELAPC. And the reason this one resonates with me is because my great-grandmother, this is back in 1920, she was widowed at an early age with 4 daughters, one of whom was my grandmother. And at the time, because she was an immigrant and she didn't speak any English, she had no choice. Either she was going to get married or she would have to leave the country and go back to China. And at the time in Chinese society, the ruling body was either the family association, so the Wong Association, or any the village association. They had set up forms of self-governance because the local authorities really didn't care what the immigrant population was doing. So the form of self-governance was family associations in this case. And because my grandmother, women became the property of their husbands, and everything that they owned belonged to their husband. My grandmother was a Wong, so she asked the Wong Association if she could get married to this man who was also a Wong. You know, I guess there were some Byzantine rules about incest, because you're technically family members now. So they gave her permission to marry him on the condition that she give up her daughters, because those daughters didn't belong to this man. And those daughters belonged to her deceased husband's family, who lived in poverty in China. Now these girls are American citizens. They were aged 8 to 2, and they were not told what was happening. My grandmother wasn't told what was going to happen to them, just that the association would take care of it. And then she had no choice. So the girls got sent from Boston to New York, and from New York literally on a slow boat to China, and they were raised there by relatives who they'd never met, in a hut with a dirt floor, in poverty. And I know this because before my grandmother passed away, we all took a family trip back to China to see where she was raised. So, now remember, these are American citizens, but this was the rule, and my great-grandmother had no choice. So when I thought about what was it that was here that was saying I can do this work, and I on some very deep level support this work, and that was why. Because had my grandmother had resources, maybe she would have been here, and you know, had my great-grandmother had resources, she could have come to a place like this. You know, it was circumstance that drove her to homelessness and that drove her to the edge of economic disaster. And she had 4 children. Had she had resources like this, she wouldn't have lost her family necessarily. She might have been able to keep them together. And you know, my grandmother's biggest heartbreak was that she was raised an orphan, and she was old enough to know that she was being sent away and not to know why.